Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our HashiCorp Solutions Engineering Hangout hosted by Jake Lundberg. Nomad is our cluster schedule that enables organizations to automate the deployment of any application on any infrastructure at any scale. Some notable users of Nomad Enterprise include Citadel and Jet.com. So today, Jake is going to show you how to use the Nomad Guide's Terraform modules to quickly launch a full Nomad cluster simply using Terraform Apply. Afterward, he will show you how to launch a heterogeneous application with both containerized and non-containerized microservices on this cluster. I also want to note that the Hangout is recorded and the recording will be made available after post-processing, usually within about a day or two. I'll email it out to all of you. The demo will be just 15 minutes and then we'll allow up to 30 minutes afterward for questions. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. Take it away, Jake.
All right, thanks, Amanda. So let me share my screen. Super. Okay, outstanding. All right, guys, so you're here for Nomad Up and Running. I'm Jake Lundberg, Senior Solutions Engineer in Southern California. I live in Redondo Beach. Because we're strapped for time, I'm not going to go into the whole bio, but I love Southern California. So thanks for attending. I'm really excited about this webinar. It's something I've been wanting to do for a while because we have some feedback from customers out there, especially new people, about how we add all of our products together into one cohesive piece. And this makes things quite a bit easier to do. Okay, so a little brief agenda about what we're going to be talking about today. This is just going to be a brief overview of Nomad. We're going to discuss the Nomad Guides repo in GitHub and our GitHub repo. We're going to go over how to do a Terraform launch using the Nomad Guides, and we'll be using the Quick Start Guides and a little bit more information about that when we get to that. We'll be launching a legacy Tomcat app, as a lot of people have Java applications that are out there. They're somewhat easy to containerize, but it's just a reference application to understand how to do something like this. And we're going to launch Fabio using a containerized version of Fabio, and then that will be our load balancer that we use for connecting to the services. Then we'll show the various GUI components of the products that are there. I'll probably be jumping back and forth between the various GUIs when we're doing this thing. And then hopefully working web application, if the demo guides are kind to us, everything will be working properly. Then we're going to do a Q&A. And lastly, and probably most importantly for those of us that are running assets inside the cloud, we want to make sure that we destroy our resources once we're done using them so we can stop charging our companies for those environments. Okay, what is Nomad? So Nomad's goal is to enable an organization to easily run any application on any infrastructure at any scale. And the major characteristics of that is that it's easy and efficient for developers to define and run workloads. It's very easy to deploy and operate. It integrates easily into your existing workflows. So if you have non-containerized applications and you don't have to go to containers in order to use the scheduling framework. It has first-class support for all major workload types. It's easy to deploy across regions and cloud providers, which is quite important because most of our large-scale customers are multi-cloud or they're multi-region, and Nomad allows you to very easily push your applications out to those different regions. I'm not going to be showing that today, but it is something that's a major feature of this. It's easy to scale, and it integrates seamlessly with all of our applications. So if you're an existing console or Vault user, it's quite easy to use those tools integrated with Nomad. We'll be integrating with console. Vault is actually running inside of this, but we won't be integrating directly with Vault for this application. And more importantly, it's very easy to learn with a really simple mental model in terms of how to run this thing. There isn't any complex networking stuff inside of here. The configuration files are actually quite easy to understand. So if you're new to the scheduling world or to application orchestration, this is a very, very easy way for you to get some gains very quickly. If you notice something, there's a predominant theme within this thing is that everything is easy, 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 easy. Nomad is extremely easy to operate. Okay, so Nomad Guides, this is really just a way for us to use another one of our tools, Terraform, which is an extremely popular way to do cloud launching and other provisioning, and there's other providers within there that we'll be looking at a little bit of that. Currently, this particular set of guides is AWS only. Our SE organization is actually working to migrate these into the other clouds, and we'll probably be getting some help from other people out there. There's two different URLs that are here. One's a long version. If you're not fast enough to type this out, you can use the second one. The tiny URL is basically just a tiny URL of the above URL. So if you want to check that out right now, you can actually go to tinyurl.com, nomad-guides. And there's three cloud flavors that are supported here. The first of is the best practices. There's a quick start, and then there's a dev guide. Each of them have their own uses. I'm going to be using the quick start, and there's a Vagrant launcher as well if you're into that kind of thing, using Vagrant for your local host. All right, so let's jump into it. Let's talk about a little prayer to the demo gods and goddesses. Please look favorably upon us. I've actually kind of cooked this thing, but I'm gonna show you what this looks like to launch this. So in this first window right here, I've actually already launched the infrastructure into AWS, and the reason for that is because it takes kind of a long time sometimes to launch these resources, depending on speed of network and speed of what's happening inside of AWS. So if we go over to my EC2 management console, you'll see that I've already launched these nodes inside of here. What's very interesting to notice, first of all, we have a publicly facing Bastion host. We have one Vault node where we're not running Vault in HA mode. We have 3 Nomad client nodes. Then we have 3 console nodes, and then 3 Nomad server nodes. So you get all of these things automatically by launching this. That way you don't have to build this infrastructure out on your own. So what does it actually look like to launch it? I'll show you this. First of all, I typically use environment variables when I'm doing local configuration or local launches of my Terraform assets. So this is just an example of what my Terraform environment file looks like. I'm going to source that. I'm going to do a Terraform init because this is the first time that I've actually run it in this particular environment. So that's going to go as you would expect it to go. Takes a few seconds for it to get going. While I'm doing that, I'm going to come back over to the other window and show you when you launch these assets, and you'll see this at the end of this. What's kind of nice about these guides is that the guides take you through how to interact with the software once you've done this. So, for instance, if it's going to output a SSH key inside of this environment, I'm going to add that identity so that when I SSH into this particular endpoint, I'll be able to use that key. Oops. And then you can see that I'll be connecting to the Bastion host inside of AWS. Now, again, this is one that was already loaded on the system. So, again, this is kind of pre-cooked, like we're watching some kind of a cooking show or something along those lines. All right, so I'm just about done doing the init for my Terraform side of things. Oh, it's still installing some stuff. See, this is why we've done this on the other side. Okay, so back to this other window over here. What you'll notice inside of here, of course, is that if I scroll down, I'm gonna get some very critical information that I can pass to my Bastion host in terms of my Nomad address, console address, and Vault address, because you can also log into things via console. You can see that if I were to do an SSH into one of the nomad.service.console nodes, because we're using console, you can see that I'm actually getting connected to one of the console servers. Down below, we have hooks into the various UIs. I actually have the UIs already up and running. This is the Nomad side of things. If you haven't seen the Nomad UI, very informative for things like that. Inside of the console UI, you also have some very deep information about the nodes and the services that are there. Currently, we just have console, Nomad, the Nomad client, and Vault are running. And then lastly, we've got Vault running. Of course, we're not going to, we'll get a little error there. So probably have to relog into that. And then lastly, I have a Fabio window, but Fabio is not actually up and running. This is from a test that I was doing last night. You'll see that this thing isn't actually running because we haven't started it up in Nomad yet. Oh, geez, this thing is still running. Okay, great. And let's see. So then again, in the output, you scroll down. We've got some more information about how to connect to console. There's the UI components that are there. And then as you scroll down even further, there's even more information about how to interact with Vault, such as doing the initial seals and then doing some status. because I have this running already, I'm going to do a Nomad status and just take a look at what's happening inside of Nomad. There's no running jobs inside of there currently. Let's see if this thing finishes up. Wow, the private writer plugin is really taking a long time. I'm just going to go ahead and move along with the launch of the stuff that we already have here. And this is why I pre-cooked this particular thing. Okay, so great. Even though we have single binaries, again, this could be quite difficult to set up if you have a lot of moving pieces like elastic load balancers and security groups and things like that. Of course, Terraform will help you do that. So another piece that's not it's not super readily apparent is the fact that I'm actually running this through a SOX proxy. So I'm going to quit this out of here. The commands that I'm using to actually connect to this, because these are privately facing interfaces only, I've already run this. Basically, what I'm doing is I'm creating a SOX proxy for my system so that I can connect into these private interfaces. And so, I'm doing an SSH-D and then passing it these parameters and putting it inside of here. If I were to go up to my Firefox settings and look at my network preferences, you'll see that I have a manual proxy configuration for my SOX host that's going to my local host in the 8765 port that I've connected to on this particular SOX proxy. This is important, and the reason for this is because this helps you have a high level of security while you're doing your testing of these environments, and you're still able to interact with things at the GUI level. So you see that these internal load balancer jobs, I'm able to connect to them by doing a SOX proxy through these particular endpoints. Okay, so this is still taking a little bit of time. We'll do the launch of that a little bit later. Okay, great. So I'm going to do a Nomad run. Actually, I'm going to do a Nomad plan of my hello world.nomad, and we'll see what this file looks like here in a second. Okay, so it looks like everything's checking out. I'm going to do a Nomad run of hello world. And if I come back over to my Nomad GUI, we'll come into the jobs area, and you can see that right now it looks like that's dead. That was something that I ran last night, but that should come back to life here in a couple of seconds, and we can verify that by doing a Nomad status of HW. And you can see that this particular endpoint is up and running. And let's take a look at what this file looks like. Okay, so here we are. Probably the most important thing to notice is the fact that we're using this raw exec driver, which allows us to run arbitrary sort of command line for things that are installed on the system. I have a few artifacts that are here. These are public, and I'll be sharing the code for this later. I'm pulling down this hello world.war, and I'm pulling down in a server.xml so that I can configure my Tomcat process. Also important here is the fact that I'm running this, I'm passing some environment variables to my Catalina.ops, and these are going to be consumed inside my server.xml. And if you notice right here, Nomad has some special environment variables that will pass back into the system once we start this up. So you can use those variables based off from there. And inside the Nomad documentation, there's a very rich set of information about which variables are there. And so Nomad taskers can be passed into my default context. That way I can find the code bits when I'm there. I'm going to run this using Catalina.shell. And the nice thing about that is that I'll be running in the foreground so that when the process is killed, it's able to actually kill these things off. And again, I'll be using the configuration file, again, reusing this Nomad tasker, and then pointing to the Tomcat conf server.xml. Down below here, this is what's actually enabling us to use the Fabio side of things. I'm using this URL prefix of hello world. And when we go to our application, you'll see what that looks like. And then, of course, I've got a health check in here to make sure that my services are up and running. Okay, let's see. Is my GUI not connected? What happened? Oh, look at that. The proxy server is refusing connection. So I guess I do have to do this. Let's connect to this host. Hopefully I've got my Bastion set up. Doesn't look like I do. Let's make sure my Bastion file is there. So sorry, guys. I'm running a little bit late. Hold on to those questions. Bastion. Okay, now I should have access to this GUI. So All right, outstanding. It'll take a second for that to load up. We'll do the same thing on the console side of things. All right, super. And while those things are loading, we're going to come back over to this window and launch the Fabio job. So same thing, we're going to do a Nomad plan on Fabio. Nomad run Fabio. And great. Oh wow, this thing is like stuck over here. Looks like my my Terraform thing. Good thing that we ran this thing beforehand, or else this would be a very uninteresting webinar. Okay, good. So if we come back over to the job side of things, we can see that I have my Fabio job running, and I've got my Hello World job that's running. And if I come over to console, now you can see that I've also registered this Fabio service. And the Fabio service is being routed to some dynamic ports on these particular nodes right here. So if I were to actually query these ports from my Bastion host, let's just do a curl. Oops. Let's just do that. Hello world. Uh-oh, what just happened? Did I do something wrong? Oh, I know why. World index.html. Okay, great. So I can see that if I connect directly to those things, I can get those. I can get that return from there. However, I don't necessarily want to do that. I'm gonna let Fabio do these things for me. So I'm actually going to load Fabio. You can see inside of Fabio, I've got these endpoints that are coming directly from console. That allows me to get to those particular endpoints. That's great. And then the last piece is, let's see what it looks like from an application standpoint. I'm going to go to a particular endpoint that I have that's running. This is a piece that I actually did manually to set up an ALB to connect directly into our private interface. But you can see here I've reloaded this domain, and then I've routed this thing called hello into index.html. And so basically what's happening is that I'm running this Tomcat app. Again, it's running out through a raw exec. I'm running Fabio inside of a container. And just so that you can see that this thing is actually running as a JSP page, we'll load the JSP page here. Wow, this is really taking a long time. I guess my internet in my house must be super slow today, so sorry for that, folks. All right, cool. Well, that's loading. Let's see if this thing actually finished up. Wow, this is still running. Oh boy. Oh, and that's my phone ringing. Okay, outstanding. Okay, so what's going on here, folks? Looks like I'm having some slowdowns in time in here. Anyway, so the overall point is that we have this set of applications that are running. I can't actually get my Terraform run to finish up, but anyways, the output of this looks like this. If you're looking for sort of verification, you can see in the old run, the previous one that I did yesterday to stand this up and running, you can see some examples of the various resources that are sitting up and running here. So again, once you finish your initialization on this guy here, assuming that I get some network access, then I'll be able to run a Terraform plan, run a Terraform apply, and you'll see those resources that get added into that environment. Okay, let's see if my web browser actually came back. Wow, this is kind of grim. I don't know what's going on. Good Wi-Fi? Yeah, I do have good Wi-Fi. Okay. So actually, what I'm going to do is go ahead and open it up for questions. This is mostly sort of the end of the demo piece of this. Wanted to give a very big shout out to Stephen Wilson and Sean Carolyn for helping with this webinar. And yeah, if you guys have any questions, fire my way. Well, hopefully, I really wanted to show you that last JSP page to verify that we're actually running in Java, but sorry about that. So go ahead, Amanda, if you've got some questions for me.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, and as a reminder, feel free to submit your questions into the portal, and we'll get them answered for you. So Jake, I think the first question, kind of to take a step back, can you walk through a bit the differences between Nomad open source and Nomad enterprise?
Yeah, so I don't have, let's see if I have the matrix inside of here. So Nomad Enterprise includes the concept of namespaces, which allows you to do a little bit more multi-tenancy with Nomad. There are resource quotas inside of there, so you can restrict any kind of resources that various things are running inside of your systems. There's also advanced autopilot, which allows you to do automated upgrades of your Nomad environment, and highly suggested if you're running this, you run it with a console enterprise as well, because that allows you to do the same type of thing. And then lastly, you have Sentinel policies, which allows you to extend kind of like ACL rules that you would have normally, but into more specific metadata for restricting the kinds of applications that may be running in the environment, where they run, and how those particular applications will talk to each other.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And then the next question, I think this kind of comes up a lot. Someone's asking, what are some of the key differences between Nomad and Kubernetes? And, how do people kind of think about when they're looking at using one, or, some companies use both in different scenarios? What are some of the benefits of Nomad?
Yeah, so I'm glad you asked that. I come from an operations background, and the last company I was working for, we spent about 2 years trying to get Kubernetes into production. One of the bigger challenges that we have is really abstracting sort of the implementation layer, the implementation details away from developers, so they don't necessarily have to continuously learn some of these platforms. Now, the mental model behind Kubernetes is also a little bit more difficult when you consider the fact that there's a sort of software networking layer that happens inside of it. So, again, Nomad's very, very easy, and super easy to get up and running. Previously, we had some really great integrations solely with Console and Vault. Some of that's changing. We're also adding some support for that in the Kubernetes world as well. But again, it's super, super easy. One of the other things that I think most people probably don't really realize is the fact that Nomad scales extremely, extremely well compared to Kubernetes. And so most of our enterprise customers that use Nomad do it because Kubernetes just can't handle the type of loads that they throw at it. And so if you have very, very large scaling type of operations, especially if you're doing sort of like ephemeral workloads, like job-based type of things, Nomad is a great way to handle those type of workloads. And again, if you're using Kubernetes, everybody in your organization also has to be in containers if you're going to put them on Kubernetes. If you want to do scheduling, but also maintain your traditional application infrastructure, maybe your developers aren't quite ready to move to containers yet, then you can use Nomad in that aspect as well. One popular pattern that we actually see for some companies is that they run both. They run, they'll run like their web apps and things like that inside of Kubernetes, but then they'll run their ephemeral job workloads inside of Nomad, or they'll run anything they need to do massive scaling into. So there is a place where we do see patterns where people use both, and they use them very successfully.
Awesome, thanks, Jake. Yeah, and when you were talking about the scaling, I had mentioned at the beginning, Citadel uses Nomad, and they have a pretty interesting story of how they use Nomad and why it was the right choice. And there might be some documentation on the website about that.
Yep.
Okay.
One of our customers, sorry, I was just going to say, one of our customers, Deluxe, is speaking at HashiCorp this year. They're actually here in LA, and I get to talk to them about what they're doing. They do some super cool stuff with Nomad, and it's part critical to their thing. So definitely watch the HashiCorp talk on that.
Yeah, I think there'll be a few probably really great Nomad talks at HashiCorp, actually. People are doing crazy things with it. So next question. So someone's asking, Jake, how did you route the hello world page to the console load balancer, the address /hello world /index.html? They're saying console DNS doesn't seem to allow a port lookup that's routable in a browser.
Yeah, right. So that's where Fabio comes in. Fabio is a console-aware load balancer. And so we're basically and I don't have the screen up here, but when you see the URL prefix that's included inside of this guy, let's see, just bring it up. You can't see this, but whoops, hello world. So down at the bottom of the service tags, you'll see that there was a URL prefix for hello world. That's actually what Fabio is using to route that information to those endpoints. And so again, Fabio is smart enough to know where those ports are at and helps you doing that routing. And so there's two pieces of it. There's an ALB that's actually pointed at Fabio, and then at the ALB layer, once it gets to Fabio will fan out those requests to the service endpoints as defined inside of console. It's a very cool tool.
Okay, thank you. Okay, and then now someone's asking, so when you fire up a new Docker container that is running some service and you want it to be advertised in console, is that possible through only Nomad without having to run the console agent in the container with supervisor D?
No, actually, the way that this is working in this particular instance is that I'm running, well, two things. We're running a console agent on every single host that the Nomad agents are running on as well. And so you get that service registration at the agent level. You don't have to register them via Nomad, but if you're running Nomad, it's highly suggested that you use the service, sort of the service stanza in order to do that. You could technically register those services by hand if you're not running Nomad by just using a service definition file. So yeah. And when it comes to the Fabio context, though, Fabio has to be run with host networking if you're running it inside a container like I am in this particular case. And the reason for that is because it needs to be able to talk to the local host port that the console agent is running on. So once we're done here, I'll upload all the code, and if you go to the actual web page for this webinar, we'll have a link to the code that includes all of the Nomad files and everything else that are inside of there. So you can use those as examples and see how we've done those configurations.
Perfect, because that was actually the next question, Jake. Someone was wondering if they would get access to demo scripts. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'll publish those. They're not published currently, but I'll publish them now. And I'm actually going to publish them under the Nomad guide so that you'll be able to go to the Nomad guides and pull that information out of there as well.
Perfect. Okay, and then it looks like we have one more question. So if anyone else has questions they were kind of thinking about, please go ahead and submit them and we'll get them answered for you. So next question, Jake. Someone's saying, if we are doing a post request to microservice in Nomad, do we need to close that post request or will it take multiple post requests?
I'm not really sure what that means actually to a microservice, and do we need to close? I mean, if it's a normal sort of web service or some kind of an API that's accepting a post, I think a lot of that depends on how you're doing your routing. So again, in this particular instance, I have 3 different systems that are running, and it's being load balanced via Fabio and the console entries. So it's possible you're not going to get multiple post requests even in the same host, but as far as I know, you shouldn't have to close out any of those things, assuming, of course, that the API on the back end is able to handle those things. So I'm not really sure, Jeff, where that actually where that works. Okay. So yeah, I see the follow up on there. Where you're doing a post request, the first post request goes away, and the second one throws a bad gateway. Not really sure. I haven't seen that particular issue, but just maybe we can get back to you through your contact information here and follow up as to where you're seeing that issue. If you're seeing this in the current context, or if you're seeing it in an application that you're running on your end, it could be something with the application, but I'm not sure. Again, I haven't seen that particular issue.
Okay, perfect. And then Jake, does Console Connect work with raw_exec as well?
Oh, yeah, it does. You could set up some, the thing about with Console Connect and Nomad right now is that there isn't really a direct integration with it. So you'd have to set up your proxy information through an actual console file on the system. So there are some ways actually that's not true, because we did end up hooking this up through Nomad, but you have to kind of write your endpoints a little bit differently than say like an automated process would do. But yeah, you can absolutely integrate Console Connect with this. I'm not sure if we have any webinar demos that are out about using Nomad with Console Connect. I know the SEs, all of us came up with a contest to see who could come with the coolest sort of iteration of this, and there are some Nomad Console Connect demos that are out there. So if I can figure out where those are at, I'll post them inside of the code for the code when I post it. So there's an example inside of there as well.
Okay, thank you. Maybe a future SE Hangout as well. Okay, and then kind of going back to the Kubernetes discussion, Jake. So someone's asking, so Kubernetes has the concept of services to load balance between multiple pods. How is load balancing handled in Nomad? Is that built in, or how are we expected to use a third party, or are we expected to use a third party load balancer?
Yeah, so right now we're actually using Fabio. So that was part of the demo, is to use Fabio to do that load balancing for you. That makes things super, super easy to be able to route between services within console. If you want to bring your own sort of technique to do that, console can be used as a load balancer as well. So if you're using ephemeral ports, it's a little bit harder to predict where those ports are going to be. So that's why a tool like Fabio is excellent. At my last job, we used Traffic or however you pronounce that thing, which is also quite popular for automatically registering services through an external load balancer. So one of those two tools is probably the best way to do that right now. And then let's see, I think that's probably the best way to explain it. You can use console as sort of a load balancer as well. But again, you have to be able to predict where those ports are at, and your application has to be able to handle that information. So I would probably just use Fabio or Traffic.
Okay, awesome, Jake. And I think we have just one more question, and this is a good one. Someone is wondering if we have any user groups in the Orange County or LA area.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just had Mitchell talk at a Hug in Santa Monica. What was it, last week or a couple of weeks ago? And then we will be going to Orange County. We ran a user group at the Nebula Works office back in, I think, April, and very likely we'll do the next one in Orange County. We'll find a location, and of course stay connected into the SoCal Hug, and you'll get information about how to attend those meetings. I would expect something maybe in the next month or two that we'll have.
Awesome, and I just sent the link in the webinar portal, but for everyone out there, if you just go to meetup.com/pro/hugs, you can see all of our user groups across the entire world. So there is likely one near you. We have 74 groups across 38 countries, and there's almost 15,000 members. So definitely take a look, and you can find some other users in your area and get connected with them. Okay, I think one last person quick submitted a question, Jake, and then we will wrap things up. So someone's asking, is there a way to view the Nomad logs in the GUI or CLI that show why a job failed to launch? Nomad job status doesn't seem to have that information, and the allocation doesn't have any logs since it hasn't started successfully. They're saying failure to authenticate to a private Docker repo is when I ran into this issue.
Yeah, currently there isn't a way to hook into the logs within the GUI itself. I'm not sure. I'll have to check with the program management team if that's something that's coming in the future. The UI components for all of our applications are being actively developed. Console's a great example of this. I hadn't been updated in a while, and we hired somebody back in January who's done a great job in updating the console UI. But the same kind of thing is happening inside of Nomad. Vault is the same way too. So yeah, I would expect that we'll see a lot more sort of deep features in the UIs as time goes on. So yeah, stay plugged into that. Absolutely check into any of the release notes or any of the blog posts that we're doing for the releases, and you'll see the type of things that are happening inside of there. But great question.
Awesome. Okay, Jake, so that's all of the questions. Thank you for powering through everything and kind of giving that extra clarification. I hope everyone enjoyed today's Hangout and has a better understanding of how you can launch full Nomad clusters with Terraform. And thank you for joining us, and a big thank you to Jake for his time today. As I mentioned at the beginning, yes, thank you, Jake, great job. As I mentioned at the beginning, this Hangout was recorded, and we will make the recording available on our website after processing. I will send an email to everyone who registered with that recording link. So with that, that wraps things up for us. Have a great day. Goodbye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.